Hello everyone, and welcome back to Isaiah from Mormons. Today we're going to be doing 2 Nephi 23, which is the same as Isaiah 13. And today we're actually starting the beginning of a new sermon. Chapter 12 is the end of the very long sermon that Isaiah gives to the king, and it runs from chapter 7 all the way through chapter 12. There's a very logical ending there at the end of chapter 12 where he sort of regifts the Song of the Sea. And here in chapter 13, it starts with the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. Very clearly, it's an introduction to a separate speech. That's, like I said, these speeches are inserted topically. So this is a separate speech that's inserted after that big long sermon. This one's not very long, it's only 2 chapters. Once again, inserted topically. I think chronologically this might be closer to the end of Isaiah's life, actually. That's the impression that I get from it. It may be close to the end of Isaiah's life that this is happening. Perhaps after Assyria actually has had some trouble with the Babylonians, maybe is when this is. So he's foreseeing the Babylonians are going to overtake the Assyrians, and then they're going to themselves be overtaken by the Medes. But Babylon is even though during a lot of Isaiah's life anyway, it's not its own power. It is, even under the Assyrians, it's a big power, and so he's going to be kind of talking about, once again, the theme that runs through all of these things. Once again, this is topically arranged, not chronologically arranged, so even though this is the end of Isaiah's life, probably, topically this is perfect here because he's talking about the sort of vicissitudes of fortune, right? It doesn't matter how good it doesn't matter how good you think you are or how big and powerful you think you are. God can turn everything on its head and will if you don't live the way you're supposed to. The Book of Mormon makes this much clearer. There are small changes in and sometimes not so small changes, made later on that obscure this. But when the changes make it very clear what Isaiah is doing here, and once again make it fit very well topically in this section with the other speeches. It's interesting, the Book of Mormon ends its discussion of Isaiah, at least the giant chunk of Isaiah there in 2 Nephi, ends with just this chapter and then the next chapter, and then that's all we get of Isaiah for a while. Because in some ways it brings it up to the present. They're talking about Babylon. Lehi and Nephi just run away from the Babylonians. So for them to be talking about this makes a lot of sense, because they're saying, listen, we know that Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians, but we also know that the Babylonians are going to get it from the Persian Empire too, which is exactly what happens. And we know this how? Because Isaiah prophesied it. Some people will probably say that this dates later, because it does talk about Jerusalem, or the Babylonians being destroyed by the Persians. So they would say, well, predictive prophecy, it's not a real thing, so this has to have been written after the fact, so they called ex eventu prophecy. But because we have it in the Book of Mormon, we can see, very clearly, this is something that Isaiah is talking about, and so he's seeing it in the future before it happens, which is interesting. We as Christians should definitely be comfortable with this idea of predictive prophecy. And if Isaiah can talk about Joseph Smith, which we've talked about before that he does, and we'll see that in a few chapters, he does more. He can definitely talk about the Persians. But once again, he's going to talk about these things in a way that would have made sense to his audience at the time that he's alive. He's not going to talk about things that aren't going to make any sense to his audience. And so sometimes when we see things that look like prophecy in certain parts of Isaiah, some of those may actually be edits because they would have made no sense to his current audience. And we'll talk about some of those things when we get to them. But this very clearly seems to be prophecy because he's very clearly laying out exactly what's going to happen and explaining it in great detail so that they can make sense of it even during their lifetime. So anyway, let's just dive in here with 2 Nephi 23, Isaiah 13. So like I said, there are some very significant changes here. So we'll just talk about them as we go along. So 2 Nephi 23, we have here the introduction, verse 1, and then his sort of explanation of what's going to happen. So it says, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. It's the introduction. And when it says burden here, that is like the curse or the burden that certain nations will have to bear because of God's sort of judgment upon them. And we get quite a few of these in Isaiah. And some people kind of skirt around these. They're uncomfortable with them because they go, well, why is Isaiah sort of talking badly about all these other nations? But I'm not sure that's something that we should be too worried about in this case. And really, one of the big issues throughout Isaiah is this idea that nobody escapes God's wrath, right? So I'm not sure we should be super uncomfortable with these. Yeah, Isaiah is speaking out against other nations, but he speaks out against his own nation too. Whenever he sees bad stuff happening, Isaiah speaks out about it. And so I think that, we shouldn't be so concerned about Isaiah, condemning these other nations. Some people would say, well, this is, just kind of extreme nationalism. It's sort of outmoded. But I say, no, Isaiah, he calls people out wherever he finds them. As my father would say, he's an equal opportunity pain in the rear. And he talks about anything bad that he sees and calls out people for their arrogance, no matter who they are, no matter where they live. And so that's why I think a lot of these are lumped together in this section of Isaiah, even though, like I said, this may be close to the end of Isaiah's lifetime. So that's really what burden means there. This is the curse that's going to come upon the nation. It says, lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain. Exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones, I have also called my mighty ones, for mine anger is not upon them that rejoice in my highness. The noise of the multitude in the mountains like as of a great people. The tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together, the Lord of hosts mustereth the hosts of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, yea, the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Now, this is different from what we have in the Old Testament, in our current Old Testament. And there are some very, very significant differences that actually change the whole meaning. So, verse 2 says, lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles. So, what does this mean? What is he talking about here? I think this means something that we've talked about before. Jehovah, the name Jehovah, probably is a short version of his full title, which Isaiah uses frequently, Jehovah of hosts. And we'll see some evidence for that in this chapter. But this idea that he's the one who causes armies to exist. That's what that name would be. It would be a complete sentence that would mean he who causes armies to exist. And that name is very fitting and works out very well in this case, and I think that's what we're seeing here. So he's talking about God, right? He's going to lift up a banner upon the mountains. He's going to call to them, exalt the voice unto them. And who is them? It's his forces, but also we see here it's also the Persians. He's going to shake the hand, sort of beckon to them, that they may go into the gates of the nobles. That phrase, I think, is talking about an old ritual that the Babylonians used to do. And eventually they would actually update the gate. If I remember correctly, it's not updated at Isaiah's time. But at a later time, they would make this really, really fantastic and beautiful gate called the Ishtar Gate today. Probably, like I said, constructed a little after Isaiah's time. But the idea was that you would go through these gates, and this was part of this big processional way that you would go on if you were a Babylonian. And you would bring the statues of the gods, and you'd have The king would go down this big processional way through this noble gate, right, gate of the nobles, and it was a necessary part of sort of enthroning the king as a sort of sub-deity, which they would do, and also commemorating the gods of Babylon. So this is a sort of royal and religious ceremony, sort of enthroning the gods and their king as a god. Okay, so he's saying usually the gates of the nobles, usually the royal court and the representations of the deities go through this gate. Well, God's going to get his hosts and the Persians to ride through this gate. And that's what we get in verse 3. I've commanded my sanctified ones, I have also called my mighty ones. Now this is a very important difference. In the Masoretic text, or in the King James Bible, what we have outside the Book of Mormon, it says, I've commanded my sanctified ones, I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger. Even them that rejoice in my highness. So, in other words, he's called these people. He's called his forces together, his mighty ones, so that they, in his anger, with him in his anger, can go and attack. But that's not actually what it means here. Notice what the Book of Mormon changes it to, and this is an important distinction. I have commanded my sanctified ones, I have called my mighty ones, and then it's a comma, which there isn't. Obviously, there's no punctuation in the Hebrew text, but this comma does help complete the sense of it and probably how it should be translated. I have commanded my sanctified ones, I have also called my mighty ones, for mine anger is not upon them that rejoice in my highness. So you see the stark contrast in verse 2. In verse 2, they're rejoicing in the highness of their king and of their deities. That's what that gave the nobles, is the processional way that you go on when you celebrate the king as God and the gods as king. Here in verse 3, it says, I've commanded my sanctified ones, I've also called my mighty ones, for mine anger is not upon them that rejoice in my highness. In other words, they're enthroning their king as a deity, and they're worshiping all these other crazy gods out in Babylon. If they had worshipped me, I would not be doing this to them. But I can't allow them to continue to do this. Okay? Mine anger is not upon them that rejoice in my highness. In other words, had they been rejoicing in my highness, not in the exalted nature of their king and their false gods, this wouldn't be happening to them. But since they're doing that, they're going to see that I really am the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies. So then in verse 4 it says, the noise of the multitude in the mountains, like as a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together, the Lord of hosts mustereth the hosts of the battle. So once again, we've talked about this before very clearly. Isaiah is actually painting a really great picture here of the Lord of hosts gathering his armies together. The one who causes armies to be is gathering his heavenly armies and his earthly armies together to fight against the Persians, to the Persians he's using to fight against the Babylonians. And Isaiah in the speech will cut back and forth. And you see, it's very visual actually. He's painting these pictures for you, that you have God gathering these hosts together to fight against Babylon, and he's talking about this, and then he cuts to the response of the Babylonians as they're shaking in their boots, cuts back to the Persians and his hosts, the heavenly hosts that are coming in to wipe everybody out, cuts back to the Babylonians shaking in their boots again and getting killed and stuff. So it heightens the tension of the sermon. Isaiah really just is a fantastic stylist, and we see this very well evidenced in this chapter. So here he's talking about the noise. It's almost like you can hear it. Everybody's gathering together. He's gathering these armies together. He's gathering the Persians together out of the mountains. They're going to descend upon Babylon. He's mustereth the hosts of the battle. He's gathering together the hosts to go to war. And you can hear it. It sounds like a great people, tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. Kingdoms of nations, probably they're kingdoms of the Gentiles, right? He's gathering everybody together to go against Babylon. It says, they come from a far country, from the end of heaven. Yea, the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. So just like the Assyrians were the rod in his hand before, that was stretched out against his own people, now it's the same thing, the Persians, but it's the Persians this time who are going to come in against the Babylonians. They're the weapons of his indignation. They're going to destroy everything. So it says, howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. So this is sort of the day of the Lord, which really means kind of the day of God's destruction. That this is the day that God has appointed to come in and destroy everything. And it says it will come as a destruction from the Almighty. Probably should be translated, it will be destruction from the Almighty. This day is going to be marked by destruction from the Almighty. And that destruction is going to come against Babylon. It says, and then it goes on in verse 7. It says, therefore shall all hands be faint, every man's heart shall melt, and they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They shall be amazed one at another, their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay down the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. So Isaiah, once again, using very strong language. Here it says, therefore all hands shall be faint, every man's heart shall melt. So like I said, we're seeing this sort of cutting back and forth between God and the Persians, and then the Babylonian response. So he's saying, listen, Babylonians, you have no recourse but to howl to God, because he's coming for you. To howl to your gods who aren't going to save you, because the real God is coming for you. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall be destruction from the Almighty. Therefore all hands shall be faint, every man's heart shall melt. So here it cuts to the Babylonians. They're all our hands are shaking. They're faint. They can't hold their weapons. They're just so afraid. Every man's heart shall melt. Everyone's just terrified. They shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. There's an interesting little addition here. In the text we have now, it says, they shall be afraid, pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. Interesting that would be added there. That's not in the original. It's not in the Book of Mormon. I don't know when or why that would be added. But when you see that that's not there, it's an excellent double parallelism. And they shall be afraid, pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. So very clearly that's what it's supposed to be. For some reason they add that little thing into the middle about a woman that travaileth. So you can see them. They're afraid. They're they have all this sort of agony that's coming upon them because of what's happening. They're so amazed that this could happen. You have to realize Babylon's wall was just the thickest thing ever. It was just super hard to get through. Nobody ever thought that Babylon could fall. But I was reading, I think it was Herodotus who talks about this story, that all he had to do was redirect the river. There was this river that runs right down the middle of the city, the main city of Babylon, and all you had to do was redirect the river, which, it's a big deal, but when you're the massive Persian army, it's not that big of a deal. And as soon as you redirect the river, you just ride right on through, the now dry riverbed straight into the city. You don't have to breach the wall at all. Now, that may be kind of a legend that had grown up, but that seems like a very reasonable thing to do to me. Um, and so that's the story, that they just right on into the city. So they really would have been amazed. How could this possibly have happened to us, right? And it says they shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. That's a very strange translation because it's a very strange phrase. Um, it looks like it should be something like their faces will be as the face of a sword or something like that. What the implication that I take away from it is that it's like really, really pale. Their faces are really pale. They're amazed, and all the blood is drained out of their faces because they can't believe this could have happened. Like I said, this would have been a shock to have your city invaded when you have these massive, massive walls that you think are unbreachable, and then the guy redirects the river to make it into your city. Right? You're gonna be totally amazed, and just the blood's gonna drain from your face. I think that's what Isaiah is talking about here. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger. Once again, the day appointed that God is going to do this, the day of the Lord, the day of judgment in a very temporal sense is sort of upon them. It says to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. And that's the key. That's the key thing here. The later text that we have makes small changes to give the impression that everybody is involved in this destruction, and God seems to dislike them simply because they're a different nationality. But it makes it very clear. No, it's not just because they're Babylonians. It's because they're rejoicing in the highness of their king and their pagan gods, and not in the appropriate God. That's why God is going to punish them. It's not because they're Babylonians. There's nothing wrong with being a Babylonian. The problem is them worshiping these other gods. And so that's what we see here. It's really because of their wickedness that this is happening. It's not about their nationality. So he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. Not just the Babylonians. And this is, I think, really key. It's easy for us to look at other people and label them as others. We say, well, they're different from us, so they must be bad. Well, God doesn't make that distinction. Even if you do things a little bit differently, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, God's fine with you being a little bit different. The issue is when you start to do things your own way and do things the way that God doesn't want you to do it. That's the problem. It's not that these people were bad. These people weren't bad because they were Babylonians. These people were bad because they were worshiping other gods and they were punished for it. But even within that, it's not like everybody is killed. It's those that are doing things improperly that are killed. Remember, Babylon and what would become the Babylonian Empire was part of the Assyrian Empire for a while. And so a lot of the people taken away, taken captive by the Assyrians, would have been taken captive into Babylon. Right? So you would have people who were worshiping Jehovah here, and you would have people who were maybe they were ignorant of the right things to do and the right gods to worship. But maybe they were doing things appropriately. God's going to punish people based on their knowledge, not based on what they do with the knowledge that they have. If people were doing a good job with the right knowledge that they had, they'd probably spare it, and that may be what he's talking about in this chapter, to destroy the sinners thereof out of it, not everybody. Right? Those that are doing it wrong, yes, they're going to be punished. Everybody's going to obviously get sort of taken down a peg, but this is to destroy the sinners. And what kind of sinners? Well, in verse 10, we get that explanation. It says, for the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. Um, the Babylonians were known for their astrology, and in fact, um, during some periods and in some languages, and in fact, I think also in Hebrew, the word for an astrologer and the word for a Babylonian are the same thing. The astrologer is someone who does Babylonian stuff. So they're very, very well known for their astrology, which uses constellations and the movement of the moon and all that stuff to figure out exactly what's going to happen. They feel like they can exactly predict what's going to go on in the future. But here he says, the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof, these things that you guys use to predict everything, you feel like you know exactly what's going to happen, that's all going to be totally worthless to you. All that astrology stuff is going to be totally wrong. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. All these things you've been using to try to predict the future, you feel like your world is all happy and everything's hunky-dory. That's not the way it is. You're not going to see the moon. You're not going to see the stars. Everything you thought was the way it was is going to be turned on its head. And I will punish the world for evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay down the haughtiness of the terrible. So it's the people that are wicked because of their egos. They think they've got everything figured out. Suddenly, they're going to realize they have nothing figured out. These are going to punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity. And these people that are so arrogant, suddenly are not going to be so arrogant anymore. He's going to lay down the haughtiness of the terrible. These people that are really strong and they're really arrogant because of their strength, suddenly they're all going to be dead. And that's really the implication here. And in fact, so many of them are going to die. It says, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. So Ophir is a place probably in what's called the Horn of Africa, sort of the Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, that area. That was a gold region, maybe a little bit farther north, maybe Sudan. It's hard to know. It could even be southern Arabia, but it's that region, kind of southern Red Sea area, probably. Although some people, anyway, this is one of those things where we don't really know exactly where it is. Some people have even placed this in like India and stuff. So we don't really know. We know that there was a bunch of really nice stuff that came from this place called Ophir, and that gold. It was a good place to get gold. So the point is not necessarily where it is. It's what he's really talking about here. It's a long ways away for them. So it's really, really hard to get and really precious. So there are going to be so few men left because everybody's going to die in the war that men will be more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. And that really golden wedge, it sounds like there's this mythical golden wedge of Ophir. The Hebrew implies that that's just the gold that comes from this place, and I guess it used to come in wedges, something akin to pieces of 8. Perhaps they'd have a big chunk of it, and then they cut it into pieces, right? That seems to be what we're looking at here. So I'll make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. And be so few men left because of the war that they're going to be sort of precious, right? And this is going to happen because he's punishing them because of their arrogance. So then he continues with the whole astrology thing. Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place, in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. And it shall be as the chased roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up. And they shall every man turn to his own people, and flee every one to his own land. Every one that is proud shall be thrust through, yea, and every one that is joined to the wicked shall fall by the sword. Their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished. Well, I will stir up the Medes against them, and shall not regard silver and gold, nor shall they delight in it. Their bows shall dash their young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. And behold, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited. neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation, neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there, but wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the isles shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant palaces, and her time is near to come, and her day shall not be prolonged. For I will destroy her speedily, yea, for I will be merciful unto my people, but the wicked shall perish. So here in 13, once again, he says, you guys think you can predict all this stuff with astrology? I'm going to shake the heavens, and the earth's going to move out of her place. You guys are going to have no idea what's going to happen. You guys use the stars to predict what's going to happen. I control the stars. One interpretation of the Lord of Hosts, some people used to think that the stars were actually these God's little infantry men. They were God's armies. And so, once again, this is kind of ironic here. Once again, it says the wrath of the Lord of Hosts. A little reminder. You guys think you can predict what's going to happen based on the stars? I control the stars. They do my bidding. They're going to come down and destroy you. There's a very interesting idea here of him taking their comfortable little astrology steeped world and just turning it on its head. And notice here, there's a small difference as we come up here on the next verse. And it shall be as the chaste roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up. And they shall every one turn to his own people, and flee every one into his own land. So here, and is added, compared to the other text. And it shall be as the chaste roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up, and they shall every man turn to his own people, and flee every one to his own land. So he says the earth, he's going to shake the heavens, and the earth will remove out of its place, and it will be as the chaste roe, right? And that real chaste roe is like the gazelle. Roe there should probably be translated as gazelle. As the gazelle that you're hunting. That's probably how that phrase should be translated. And as the sheep that no man taketh up. The idea of these kind of lone animals, they're usually with a herd, right? Gazelles are usually with herds, and sheep are usually with actual herds of livestock. But you have these lone animals, the chaste roe, the gazelles that sort of chased away from the flock, and the sheep that's wandered off that no man taketh up. And they're going to be isolated. They're not going to move with the heavens in their usual form. And because of this, the Babylonians are going to kind of fall to pieces. Everything's going to be disrupted. So just as the earth is going to be moved out of its place, and the constellations and the astrology is going to fall to pieces, every man shall turn to his own people and flee everyone into his own land. So the earth is going to be on its own, just like the chaste roe and the sheep that no man taketh up. But also, that means the Babylonian Empire is going to fall apart. So every man will turn to his own people and flee to his own land. Suddenly, this very loose coalition that was the Babylonian Empire, which was kind of held together by fear, honestly, this is going to be dissolved. And all this big empire is going to break up into little countries again for a short time until the Persians occupy them. And here, then in this next verse, we also get a really big difference. In the standard text, King James, it says, everyone that is found shall be thrust through. Everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. So basically, this is like all the Babylonians are going to be taken out. But once again, earlier in the chapter, it didn't seem to be that way. It was talking about the wicked. Well, here, that's what we get in the Book of Mormon in the original text. Once again, they've changed this to be a little bit more nationalistic, whereas originally it was about righteousness, not about these people being Babylonians. By the time later on, obviously, people have no great love for the Babylonians, so this is going to be much harder on them as a group, rather than just the wicked among the Babylonians. So the original says, everyone that is proud shall be thrust through. Yea, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. Everyone that is joined to the wicked shall fall by the sword. So, very different here. And this makes a lot more sense. It's those that are arrogant. This fits with the theme of this part of Isaiah. The arrogance, no one escapes. If you are proud, you will be destroyed. That's what Isaiah keeps talking about. So they that are proud shall be thrust through by the sword. Yea, and everyone that is joined to the wicked shall fall by the sword. So all that are doing the wrong things will be punished for their deeds. And it's pretty bad. It says, their children shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. You have to understand what a chariot is in the ancient world. It's the equivalent of today's tanks. You'd have guys on the chariots with a big shield. Sometimes you'd have up to 5 people on one chariot. Okay, very much more like tanks than what we sometimes think of when we think of chariots. You'd often have 5 people, 3 to 5 on one chariot. One guy holding a shield to protect the driver. Then you would have a driver. Then you would have a guy shooting arrows off the back. Sometimes then you would have another shield guy to protect everybody else, and then you'd have a guy with a spear stabbing people as you drive by. So the horses obviously can trample people, and you've got arrows flying off the back, something akin to a machine gun turret. These bows are actually not too shabby at the time. They're not quite good old-fashioned Mongol compound bow or something like that, but they're pretty good, and so they're really able to fire a bunch of arrows off these things. So the horses can run people down. You got arrows flying off the back, and you got a guy with a spear stabbing people as they drive by. And what are you going to do? Because you got the shield guys protecting everybody. So this is a very effective and devastating fighting system. So it says their children shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. It'll literally just maybe run over, right? It's a very grim image. But it's probably the kind of thing we're talking about here. Or even, soldiers just coming in and just not even caring about anybody, just killing everything, right? It says their houses shall be spoiled. So all their stuff is going to be taken away. Spoiled there probably implies like looted. And their wives ravished. Yes, that is exactly what you think it means. That was a very common thing in the ancient world in warfare. And in fact, up through World War II, it was common to have rape be associated with military conquest. And unfortunately, I think it's still the case in certain parts of the world. So that's what that's talking about there. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them. So it specifically names the country. This is the Persian Empire. Which shall not regard silver and gold, nor shall they delight in it. Very interesting phrase. You're not going to be able to buy them off. That was a very common thing. During some periods, you could just buy off the invading army so that you could sort of become a vassal and they wouldn't hurt you. This basically says, no, you're not going to be able to do that this time. No amount of money is going to be able to pay them off. They're going to come in and they're just going to take you out. Their bows shall also dash the young men to pieces. This is what I'm talking about. Something akin to a machine gun turret, right, with that archer on the back of his chariot. And they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. This is a parallelism. Have no pity on the fruit of the womb is explained. Their eyes shall not spare children. So they're just going to kill everyone. Soldiers, young men, little kids, they don't care. They're going to kill everybody. And once again, you can't pay them off. So you can see sort of the chaos into which things have descended at this point. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So God sent down fire from heaven for Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, he's going to call in the hosts of heaven and the Persians to come take out Babylon. It's going to look just about the same. A smoldering pile of ruins. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. So here it says Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency. So that's, it's just showing how beautiful and ornate this city is. The Chaldees are the Babylonians. So this very sort of agricultural, settled civilization that uses the agriculture of the rivers to exist, their capital isn't even going to be good enough for Arabians, these desert nomads. They're not even going to bother pitching their tent there. It's not even going to be good grazing land for shepherds to be there. And nobody's going to live in it from generation to generation. And in fact, this is exactly what happens. Babylon, after existing for a while, falls off the face of the earth. And for a while, we didn't even know exactly where it was. People thought it might have been a myth, because how could this big city just disappear? Well, when rivers change their courses, which does happen sometimes with the Tigris and the Euphrates, which is the rivers that were the main sort of heart of the Babylonian Empire, suddenly these places become worthless. And indeed, this place was just abandoned, and so that's why it's kind of an archaeological gold mine. A lot of cities just keep getting built one on top of the other, right? You can sort of smooth out the ruins after the most recent empire comes to town, and you just build new stuff on top. But that's not what happened here. It did for a while, and in fact, Alexander the Great lived there for a while. But eventually, it really just became abandoned. It says, but wild beasts of the desert shall lie there. It's not even going to be good enough for shepherds and nomads. Wild beasts of the desert will live there. Their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, sort of just these animals of the desert. Doleful creatures, probably sort of unlucky animals. That's what I get out of that. And owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. Some of this language is kind of hard. We don't know exactly what all this is. Owls, probably just owls. Satyrs, obviously not satyrs. This is probably some kind of desert animal, like perhaps a jackal, something like that. And the wild beasts of the island shall cry in their desolate houses. Now, once again, wild beasts of the island, obviously not, islands like of the sea. This might be sort of oases, wild beasts that go from oases to oases. Getting water will come here, and this will just be overrun by sort of howling wild animals. And the dragons in their pleasant palaces. Once again, this is some kind of desert animal. We don't know what a lot of these are. Maybe a jackal or a wild dog of some kind. Once again, kind of difficult. Satyr also might be goat up there. Kind of difficult to know. For her time is near to come, and her day shall not be prolonged. And her day shall not be prolonged. So all these animals are just going to come and live there. For I will okay, and so that's how it ends in the King James Version. And her days shall not be prolonged. But here it says her day shall not be prolonged. So once again, the day of the Lord, this day is going to come and it's going to get wiped out in a very short period of time. For I will destroy her speedily. This is what's added in the Book of Mormon. Okay. For I will destroy her speedily. Yea, for I will be merciful unto my people, but the wicked shall perish. In the King James Version, this is kind of doesn't make sense because it jumps right from 13 into 14, which is talking about his people. And you go, wait, what? What just happened? Well, here there's a very logical transition. Her time is near to come, her day shall not be prolonged, for I will destroy her speedily. Yea, for I will be merciful unto my people, but the wicked shall perish. So these are the wicked perishing. It's not because they're Babylonians, it's because they're wicked. Now the next chapter he talks about his own people who were saved. But once again, I think it's important to remember here in this chapter that God doesn't really care who you are. All he cares is that you're righteous. He doesn't care where you live. He doesn't care what your background is. He doesn't care where you came from. He just cares that you're righteous. If the Babylonians were righteous, he would have been just fine with them. But they weren't. So he punished them. Brought in the Persians to punish them because they were wicked, because of their arrogance. So I don't think that we should be too hard on others because we sort of put them in this little box and say, these are others. We should look at them as just people. And we should remember that God doesn't care where they live. God didn't care these people were Babylonians. He cared that they were doing the wrong thing. And the Book of Mormon is very clear about that. That's the significant element of the changes here in this chapter of the Book of Mormon compared to the other stuff. It's how you act that matters. It's not about where you live, where you came from. I will be merciful to my people, but the wicked shall perish. And who are his people? His people are those that listen to him, that rejoice in his highness, as he says at the beginning of the chapter. So I think as we go through this, we need to remember Isaiah is not he's not some kind of xenophobe. He's talking about these other nations because he's calling out the wicked no matter where they live. Now he's calling out the arrogant no matter where they live. So the take home should not be an Israelite. The take home of this should be don't be arrogant. So anyway, that's chapter 13, and I'll see you guys next time.